Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. Today, we're going to talk about, before we get into today's topic, I was seeing on the news, and some people were complaining about, it's interesting, that now do you know about this, Scotty? In the educational systems now, in the elementary schools, I think it was even in LA, I'm not sure where you are, but they're setting up so that children of color are in separate classrooms from whites.
I haven't heard anything like that.
Yeah, and then another place, I forget where this was, but there's a school that was having an after school or afternoon or weekend or whatever party get together, and it was only for people of color, which is really interesting because I remember the time when the liberal movement was about, integration. But now it seems like the extreme left is doing the opposite, and it's segregation. And but I think my perspective on that isn't really probably very typical. And what my perspective is, it goes right back to this thing that I have said in the past about the distinction between racism and cultural integrity. And it's just blurred in society. It still doesn't seem to get that racism is bad. Cultural integrity is good. It only becomes bad when it goes insane and becomes racism. But I get it. If a bunch of name any small group, a bunch of Italians, if they want to get together and have their traditional dances and celebrations and all, as depicted in The Godfather, the beginning of the first Godfather, so be it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think it's fine. And it's not racist. And now if they want to do this thing where a bunch of blacks want to get together on a weekend or something at a school, it's probably fine. And why do I say probably? Because it depends on, doesn't it? It depends on attitude. If it's a reinforcement, an affirmation of the integrity of their own culture, I think it's a good thing. But if it's all about attitude. It's all about relationship with, as I like to say it. Because if it's a militant thing, if it's we're anti-white, then it's not a good thing. Then it goes, and cultural integrity morphs over into something bad, which is racism. But if you just keep those two concepts in mind, cultural integrity versus racism, and racism is cultural integrity gone insane, you'll see that crop up many places in society. And to me, that's just an immature relationship that society and even the world has with respect to that whole arena of cultural integrity versus racism. You follow that, Scotty? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I remember growing up. We moved to this suburb, and I joined this baseball team, and that's kind of how I got integrated into the community. And there was a lot of Italian Americans out there, and there was the Italian American Club, and they had all sorts of festivals and things like that, and it was awesome, but it wasn't like at the exclusion of anybody else, either. But it was primarily all these groups getting together and having a great time and celebrating their heritage and the food. And it's just think about all the Greek thing, when you go to those too,
Sure. German, Greek, Italian, Jewish. It's a good thing, and it's a beautiful thing, and it needs to be honored. At any rate, I just wanted to say something about that. But today's topic is an interesting one. I call it the ancient secret of fire, and where to start with this. Of course, when we use the word fire in this context, we use it in different ways. First, there's literally fire, like from a match, but there's also like digestive fire. And all different levels of fire. Okay. In fact, fire, like everything else in the Vedic tradition, exists transgradiently from the most superficial, which is a lit match, to the deepest, most transcendental level of understanding. And well, like in the Chinese medicine, they have yin and yang, water and fire. In the Vedic tradition, it's Agni is fire, and Soma is water. It relates to like the sun, fire, and the moon, water. Okay, and those two things need to be in balance. There was an interesting thing I read in a Jyotish book, I think, a Vedic astrology book once. I think it's where I saw this, but I like the concept. It said it's no coincidence that the sun and the moon, when you look at them in the sky, are exactly the same size, because there has to be balance in the universe. Now, I'm not saying that's every solar system or what have you, but that balance would emerge in different ways, and I just thought it was a nice thought. But now let's take a look at the deeper transcendental value of fire, and that is Agni. And in the whole the structure of the Veda, the essence of the Veda is Rig Veda, 10 mandalas. And the first mandala, the very first syllables, the first word is Agni, fire, Agni. And everything max. So is like a fully open throat, unboundedness, no edge, no thingness, the Chaitanya value, the transcendental value, pure isness, the foundation of all existence. And then Gu is the opposite. It's closed throat, the antithesis of you could say. And I relate that to like you have consciousness, pure isness, the basis of all existence. And then consciousness, when it becomes aware of itself and perceives it as other, collapses it down to a thing, you see. And so all of it is contained within the name Agni. And so it starts out translated, I adore Agni. Now, even that, what is, that's the beauty of this whole Sanskrit language, is it's so deep. But what does it mean to adore? Even that, it's, we can take it on a very superficial level, or we can take it on a very deep and profound level. And it speaks then of the relationship between fire and water, yin and yang, Agni and Soma. But let's take a little closer look at Agni. And on the superficial, this is also cool. I hope I can get this across. On the superficial level, what does fire do? It incinerates. It, ashes to ashes, that whole cycle of existence and then back to no thingness. So on that level, it incinerates. But now this is an interesting thing, because on the deepest level, Agni, there's a personified correlate. Agni is a god, a face of God, however you want to say it. But there's a very powerful type of yajna, type of ceremony, type of technology. See, these things are technologies. They're not just fun ways of worshiping. It's all beautiful and all that, but there's the science behind it. It's a very precise scientific mechanic, and that's called a havan. A havan is a Vedic technology where fire is used, and it takes different things with different mantras, because these mantras I remember once my teacher said an interesting thing. He said, herbs are good, gems are better, mantras are the best. And he was talking about different levels of technology there, you see. And so the technology of mantras, when implemented with fire, what they say is that when things are offered to the fire, it's Agni, the fire, that takes those things and offers them to God, or whatever aspect of God, whatever face of God is being addressed with the chants and the mantras and that whole technology. So what are we really looking at there is a taking of something and then bringing it to the fundamental level of no thingness, pure isness, transcendental value, that's Chaitanya level. And the vehicle that does that transformation is fire. Just as with food, digestive fire takes food and transforms it into something that nourishes the body. So fire has that transformative value on many different levels. And on the level of Bhagavan, the Vedic technology, transcendental, very deep technology, it becomes a technology of the unified field. And we know that as you go deeper, things become more powerful. They can become more elusive, they become more subtle, but they become more powerful. Just for example, on a very superficial level, well, you got a hammer and a nail, not very powerful, but you can build a house with it, but it's not very powerful. On a deeper level, like with chemistry, you have electric light bulbs, or with chemistry, you have gunpowder. It is more powerful technology. And as you go to the deepest level, the quantum mechanical level, the unified field level, you have profoundly powerful technology. Now, our implementation of that in the West is very crude implementation of fire on the transcendental level. So you end up with an atomic bomb. But with Vedic technologies, there we have a technology where we can reorganize and restructure and affect transformation in a very positive way, in a very supportive way. Now, is that all? That's all clear, huh, Scotty?
Yeah,
pretty much.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. Uh-huh.
So now here's where that goes. Right now, as we've talked about on this podcast so many times, I'm tempted to review it all, but I won't. I'll just say we're going through a transformation to a golden age, and the means of how that transformation from Kali Yuga, the age of ignorance, to a brief period of Sat Yuga, which is age of a golden age, an age of enlightenment, if you will. The means of that is what? It's through Agni. It's that fundamental contained within and then Agni. The way the whole language of Veda is structured, it's all contained in If you really understand you'll get everything, because everything else just follows. What follows is Aga, and so there's a sequential unfoldment. And so Agnim, then Agnim Prohitam, and then it goes on and on. It's interesting, just tangentially, that the ninth word is the Ratna, which means on a superficial level, gemstone, but on a deeper level, that we're talking about the crystalline, abstract algebraic structure of intelligence that underlies all existence. And then it continues to unfold sequentially from there. You see, that's the whole Rig Veda. And so much I'd like to say, but there's just volumes, So here's the idea then, that fire brings about the transformation from the age of ignorance to the age of enlightenment. And so the question is, how is that fire, that transformational quality, you see, called fire, how is that going to bring about that transformation? Well, it depends on how that fire is implemented. And if it's not implemented artfully, you could say that's what Armageddon is all about. The whole planet gets incinerated, We're way beyond that. That's not going to happen. On the deepest level, though, you can take that transformative value of fire and you can employ unified field technologies to bring about that transformation in a very beautiful and harmonious way. That's why they call, for example, meditation and different spiritual practices, they call them tapas. What does tapas mean? It means straightening by fire. When we meditate, it's a fulfilling, beautiful experience. But nevertheless, what's really happening there is that the karma, world karma, that's leading in a direction otherwise of what? Stress, anger, hatred, conflict, Armageddon, what have you. It gets transformed on a very deep level of the meditator's life. And you could say then that karma, that negative karma, gets incinerated. So that's the process. So meditation is very powerful. The havans that I just talked about, the fire ceremony, see, it's a way of implementing this transformative value of fire that changes everything. Because keep in mind here, we're talking fire in a broad sense. We're talking yin and yang. We're talking Agni and Soma. We're talking the two fundamental elements that permeate all existence. You see? Soma is water. Right now in the world, I mean, you don't have to look too far, I don't think, to realize there's way too much fire. And so what's needed then is, first of all, that fire be channeled in a constructive, not a destructive way. And also that it needs to be balanced with Soma. We need more Soma. We need more yin value. We need more peace and harmony and that kind of a thing. So you got Agni and Soma, you see. There's an interesting, just kind of tangentially, I guess, you know, gemstones. There's a whole technology in Ayurveda, and it shows up in different disciplines of the value of gemstones, not just by wearing them and the influence that they have, but also by making what's called bhashmas. Bhashmas are, they take the gemstone and they incinerate it. They cook it in a crucible and it becomes like a fine ash, a fine powder. And that way it releases the subtle influence of that, and it's ingested. Now and you ingest it. And there's a whole science to that. I wouldn't go try and incinerate gemstones and eat them. That'd be a mistake. But interestingly enough, one of the popes died. This was a long time ago. And somehow they did an autopsy or whatever, years later or whatever, I don't know. But somehow they discovered that his belly was filled with crushed gemstones, but they weren't incinerated. So you see, the knowledge got lost, you know. But to this day, there are things with bhashmas in them, and they're prescribed by real experts in the field of Ayurveda, and it has a positive effect. Now, there's another thing here that I know people have trouble with this, and that is that, see, our worldview, I mean, we're so indoctrinated into a perspective, right? And that's how we see things. And anything that lies outside of that, we tend to reject it. So in that sense, what we consider to be gaining knowledge is just anything that conforms to that worldview. And we call that education. Whereas, you know, real education is expanding awareness and seeing beyond the limitations of our current indoctrination. So again, we're stretching boundaries here perhaps, but the integration, the interconnectedness of all things is really not appreciated or understood. There's a connection. You know, there's a thing in the Bible. What does it say? Something about that, you know, human beings are responsible for all the animals and the plants and everything. And somebody once asked me what that meant. And I said that human beings have the capacity to bring the awareness to that transcendental level, that deepest level of existence, function from that place. And when they do that, what they're doing is they're radiating out the inner intelligence, the inner coherence that feeds and nurtures all of life. And if that was there all the time, it would be a golden age, right? And just how far does that reach? How, you know, what's that expression? How deep in the rabbit hole does this go? Or I don't know. Anyway, if enough of that value would radiate out, it would change everything. It would change everything. So there's a pollution of the atmosphere, storms, where storms erupt, if they erupt where there are people or where there are no people. All these different things have a correlation to the global consciousness, the state of consciousness. What do I mean by that? The degree to which that inner intelligence and harmony and peace is radiating out and permeating all levels of existence. And I know I saw this guy on the news once, and he was interviewing somebody who was bringing up that point, and he just mocked them. He just thought he just wouldn't even hear of it. But it's an ancient secret. It's what the ancients knew. It brings about huge transformations in our understanding and our thereby our willingness to implement these ancient technologies that are there but have been ignored and rejected because people get indoctrinated into a particular paradigm that doesn't accommodate that deeper level of understanding. You see, and you know, that's really what Mount Soma is all about. Is we're bringing forth these technologies that have the ability to well that value up through all of life, because you can't make coherence out of incoherence. It's not going to happen. And if we've got all this craziness going on the surface of life, wars, all this nonsense, and everybody knows it's nonsense. You know, why are there wars? Why do people hate each other? Why is this all this terrible stuff going on? There makes no sense. But it's because there's that degree of incoherence permeating the global consciousness. And so trying to heal it on that level, well, we're right. If everybody thought like us, the world would be fine. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's trying to create coherence out of incoherence. So what happens is we have to take this deeper level. The technologies are there. We well it up through existence. And then people will start thinking in a more coherent and behaving even more importantly. I mean, you can hear this little thing I just said now. And, oh, yeah, I get it. Okay, what else can you teach me? No. You haven't learned anything, perhaps, until you've taken it on and found the truth of it inside and start functioning from that level. And then there becomes a commitment to not just getting it as an intellectual concept and putting it in a shoebox in your closet and forgetting about it, but actually living life that way and implementing this understanding. And the potential is enormous. It's far beyond what we can even comprehend, you know. What else, Scotty?
Well, I was just thinking about, you know, it's so sticky what this process of kind of how many times throughout history has it been all together, or you know, what would have been the keys to those kinds of times, you
It's
know?
actually a very profound point. If they had this knowledge, why would it ever go away? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's only been like I was reading of like the Roman Empire, you know, the Roman Empire. There was only like maybe a handful of those guys where it was actually like they weren't at war, you know, they were just thriving or whatever. I mean, take any point in time, you know.
What they say about that is what is responsible for that is time. let's say you have an enlightened age and everything's great and everybody's harmonious and everybody's living great. Everybody has an expanded awareness, if you will. What happens is it gets somewhere along the line, something gets out of balance, some little something. And so there becomes a faction or a person or a group of people that are kind of out of alignment with natural law. But it can be so subtle at first that nobody even notices, and then slowly, that just creeps in over time, like a thief in the night, if you will. And that process, see, like we talked about, if you think about it, everything in nature cycles. And so that in over, thousands and thousands of years, there's a cycling, and I'm talking tens or hundreds of thousands of years, there's a cycling of global consciousness from a place where it's living in harmony with natural law, Sat Yuga, to a place where it's way out of whack, Kali Yuga, which is where we're at now. But when Kali Yuga gets so extreme, it's almost like the tension gets so intense, so strong, that nature then recoils and reverts back. And in that moment, it can happen different ways. It can happen through Armageddon, or it can happen through a wiser approach, implementation of Havans, implementation of meditation, proper meditation, which is a whole other lecture, a whole other talk. And also, just the whole idea of fire ceremonies. We're not talking about, let's have a fire ceremony and build a bonfire and we'll write anything we don't like on a piece of paper and throw it in the fire to get rid of it. No, we're talking about a subtle technology here. That's not a Havan. That's just whatever. We're talking about a sophisticated technology that requires a vast amount of knowledge and understanding so that you can implement this technology in an effective way. You see, I don't mean to sound too derogatory or anything, but it's almost just like emotional indulgence, I don't want to get too much off on a tangent. The whole spiritual arena oftentimes gets, at least in groups, gets overtaken with emotional indulgence, we love God, and all this. And a lot of those people have been kicked out of the temples in India. They won't even let them in the temples because it's just so over the top lunacy, Anyway, another technology, by the way, and I've talked about this in previous podcasts, is called the Rudra Shake. I talked about how Shiva is that Chaitanya level, that pure transcendental level. And there's a ceremony, we do it in the temple here every single day. It's called the Sri Rudra Shake. And what it does is it takes that underlying basis of existence, wells it up through that infinite coherence that's inherent in its nature, and wells it up through relativity. And what that does is it straightens by fire, if you will. But again, we're not talking about burn down buildings or anything like that. We're talking about a intelligent, healthy implementation of straightening by fire, a constructive one, just like the digestive fire is a good thing, and it's like that. And so when that wells up and destroys, that's why they call Shiva the destroyer, because when you take that Shiva value and weld it up through relativity, it destroys all the incoherence, destroys all the negativity, destroys all the crud. Or we could say another way, it enhances and feeds the harmony and the wisdom and the intelligence and the coherence and the peace and the love. But now, when that source of harmony and intelligence and peace and love is met by the incoherence of the group consciousness, the incoherence of the group consciousness doesn't see that as peace and love. It sees it as a threat. And that's why a lot of these Vedic, and that's why, from that perspective, Shiva then becomes Rudra, the terrible one, the one that's going to destroy this whole beautiful wickedness. It's, I think the way they put it in The Wizard of Oz, didn't the Wicked Witch of the North? Oh, you're destroying my beautiful wickedness or something. But it's, kind of that idea. And so that's why Shiva then is viewed as a destroyer. And you see that a lot in the Vedic tradition. Kali, for example, is seen as the horrible one, with blood coming down her mouth or whatever, but it's all there is to that. What they're doing is they're freeing, they're emancipating the world by destroying negativity. Make sense, Scotty?
Yeah, it does. It's like I was thinking. It's like it's purifying. That in a way.
Purification is tapas,
Yeah.
straightening by fire.
Yeah.
And fire, then we're using it in the broadest sense of the word. But if it's not handled properly and stuff, then it's the crudest sense of the word, and that's where this idea of Armageddon comes from. But we're past that, and we're doing all this stuff we can every single day. The technology is there. The ancients had it. It's an ancient secret and the reason it's secret is because nobody embraces it, and it just gets lost to time. But it's coming back now. And the golden age is right around the corner. So hang in there. We're in a phase transition now. Phase transitions are turbulent. But hang in there. Great times are coming. Really great time. You want to be around just to witness it. It's going to be magnificent. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I think that'll do it, huh, Scotty?
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you again next week. Thank you.